Hello, welcome to Shad Life. I am going to do another upgrade. What's kind of funny is I feel like all I've been doing is drivetrains lately. So I did the Advent X one on my other fat bike right before I sold it and ended up getting this one. And then I did the AXS drivetrain on my Rustler just a few days ago, and SRAM has a sale going on, and so I actually got a really good deal on the AXS, the GX AXS drivetrain, but they also have a sale going on all their regular components. So I decided to upgrade my fat bike to GX shifter and chain. If you look at this drivetrain, you know, the chain's actually probably not in that bad a shape. So I am not 100% sure I'm going to change that, because it's not a good idea to change just the chain without changing the cassette. So I might save the chain for when I want to update the cassette. But this, if you look closely, let's see if I can get more light on it for you. You can see kind of how it's got rust on the spring there and stuff like that. And these, the little pivot bolts and stuff are rusty. You know, this has really seen better days. So I might as well upgrade it. I'm trying to just get it so you can see it really good. And so that's what I'm gonna do. And since, I mean, the NX shifter will still be compatible, but why not upgrade to a GX shifter? I've actually never had a GX shifter, because the last time I upgraded to GX, I left the NX shifter on, and this was on my Ripmo AF, and then I put the GX derailleur on it and cassette and all of that. But this time I want to upgrade the shifter, and then I'll get to see if there's actually a difference in how the shifter feels and stuff. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and start doing this update. Pretty cool. One thing that did happen is I cleaned this bike all up. Spent all this time getting it all nice and clean, and then I went on a ride a couple weekends ago, and we ended up having to go through some deep, like, mud sections. It wasn't like a mountain bike trail. It was down by the river bottoms. Here in Minnesota we have the Mississippi River and Minnesota River. This was the Minnesota riverbed. It's down there, and there were just a couple of parts that were wet. And I literally was probably up to here in mud going through. So yeah, so much for having it all cleaned. I guess I'll be re-cleaning it. Okay, so I took off the rear derailleur. I removed the shifter. The cool thing is the shifter just mounts right to the brake lever, because it's a SRAM lever. And you know, there's like just a lot of things while I have this taken apart that I want to clean up. Like looking at this bolt and looking at this lever and things like that. Plus, my rear brake doesn't return very well. So while I'm doing all of this, I'm going to take the wheel out. I'm going to take this guard off because it bugs me, which means I take the cassette off. And they're there in case your chain goes over, but I have my system dialed enough to where my chain doesn't go over unless I was to bend the derailleur or something. And they're ugly, and this one's all dirty and nasty looking, so that'll come off. I'm going to look at the brake, see if the spring is not working right or something, or if the brake just got too nasty and corroded over the years of riding in salt and snow. Might even need to replace the caliper. I don't know. Maybe I'll re-bleed it and do all that. I might as well do all that while I'm working on this. So I'm definitely not going to do a step-by-step tutorial, because I've already done one on the brakes a couple of times, Shimano brakes, SRAM brakes, and I've already done plenty of drivetrain installs. So I'm basically gonna do a lot of that work and then just kind of show you the finished product. And might not even happen today. You'll know when I'm wearing a different shirt. Okay, it is now the next day. Yesterday I took the whole rear wheel apart, took the cassette off, cleaned it as best as I could. I bled the brake, did a lot of work here before I throw the new stuff on. It gave me an opportunity to clean a bit also. One thing I learned, because I wasn't sure on this wheel whether it was going to be a regular XD driver or the Shimano spline cassette, or driver, and it is a Shimano one, which is what I assumed, because this came with NX, and NX at least cassettes are a 12-speed on a Shimano driver. So and the old school Shimano driver, not the micro spline. So if I ever do want to upgrade this to GX, I have to go through that same upgrade of finding XD cassette driver. Because this bike was kind of a mixed match of parts, I just wasn't sure. I was kind of hoping that Salsa equipped this with a higher end cassette and just saved money on the derailleur and stuff, because it's all compatible shifting wise, but they didn't. This is Shimano driver, so I'm gonna leave this cassette for now. It does have an aluminum body, so it's not super heavy, but all the cogs are steel, so it's not as light as an X or GX driver, but it's not terrible either. It's got a lot of cutouts, all that. So so the next thing is going to be installing the GX derailleur. I have everything taken out. I'm gonna reuse this housing because it seems to be fine. I definitely checked it, because what's kind of crazy about this bike is it was used as a commuter. So it was ridden in the salt. It's a 2000, and it's pretty crazy what the salt will do. Like when I took the cassette off, the cassette, the body, the driver body was rusty, like had rust all over it. So it's crazy where the salt will get. The other thing is with the brake, when I took that all apart the first time, I noticed that the pistons had rust and stuff like that, and the brakes still don't feel all that great. They feel kind of mushy, and I bled them. This is like the second round of bleeding them. I don't think it's the bleed system. I think it's the caliper is pretty trashed. I think that I'm gonna have to get new brakes if I want this to feel better. I have these exact same glide brakes on my Surly low side, and they feel way better than this. So yeah, riding a bike in the winter on salty roads and everything definitely does a number on it. So I'm going through this piece by piece, slowly fixing the things that need to be fixed. So once I get the drivetrain in, the next thing will be probably considering new brakes. You got to enjoy nice shiny new parts, because for me, they don't stay nice and shiny for very long. This does have that lockout where you can lock it out to take the rear wheel off easier. The thing I never use, and everybody tells me, why don't I use it? Because I'm so used to just being able to pop the back wheel on and off without using it. It's kind of one of these newfangled things they've added to derailleurs, and I've been doing this for so long I just forget that they exist. But I'll try to start using this more and more, maybe just to make some of you happy who always mention it in my videos. Yeah, but nice shiny new, gonna go on the bike. I already installed the shifter, also nice and shiny new. Still got to feed the wire through, obviously, but I'm going to install this first and then start getting everything hooked up. So this is what everyone talks about. There's this little button here and you can get your derailleur, trying to do this one-handed of course, into the lock position, and then to unlock it, I believe, yep, you just push it forward and it unlocks. So once I have the chain and all that stuff on there, I can kind of show how that works. And it does make taking the rear wheel out easier. Mostly what it does is it prevents you from having to touch the chain and get grease all over your hands. Because what I usually do when I'm taking the rear wheel out is I literally grab the derailleur and pull it out of the way with my hand, and the wheel just pops right out. But by using this little lockout, you don't have to do that. So before I start installing the chain and cable and everything, one of the things I like to do is there's those 2 limit screws right there. I like to set my limits, at least get them really close. And obviously you can see the derailleur doesn't come all the way in alignment with the small cog, but I like to get it set up so it aligns with the biggest cog and the small cog with the limit screws before I do anything else. Then that way when I get everything else hooked up, it generally will be pretty close to just working. Okay, so I have the chain on there. I do not have the cable hooked up at all yet, so I'll do that next here. But what I like about doing it this way is I can check my limit. So it's in the small ring right now, and I can just pedal and push on the derailleur and get it to shift all the way up into the big ring, and I can see that it doesn't want to jump off or anything like that, and I'm pushing all the way on the derailleur, and then I can bring it back down into the small ring and make sure that that's lined up all nicely. So my limit screws are set. I can always fine-tune them, but at least they're super close right now. What I like about this is when I go ahead and hook the cable up and I pull it tight and play with the shifter, usually the first time that I do it, it'll shift into all the gears perfectly. But what happens is everything starts to set in place. This stuff seats into place, the cable stretches a little bit and whatever, and then the shifting gets off, and then I go ahead and tension it again. And usually it only takes me that second time of tensioning before my shifting is like spot on. So that's kind of why I like to do it this way. I don't know what other mechanics do. I kind of do what I do based on what I've learned over the years and not so much follow the norm of what other people do. So everything's all set for me to hook up the cable, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and we'll see how it shifts. So you might be asking, but Shed, at the beginning of the video you showed us that you have this new chain, and I believe I mentioned that I might not use it. So why wouldn't I use the new chain? Those of you who are bike mechanics or been doing this for a long time know why you don't want to put a brand new chain on an old cassette. What happens over the lifetime of that was kind of loud. The lifetime of the cassette and chain is they wear together, and they, like, even if this is a little worn, the chain is properly stretched and everything, this still shifts perfectly. At least when I had the NX on there, it shifted perfect, never skipped gears. These teeth still look like they have some life left in them, whatever. If I was to put a new chain on here, it may or may not work. The risk would be that the new chain wouldn't be stretched properly or perfectly work, be perfectly worn in with the wear of the cassette, and then it wouldn't shift very well, and then that would require me to need to get a new cassette. Since this chain still has some life left in it, and so does the cassette, I'm just going to upgrade the derailleur and shifter and leave the old chain and the old cassette on. Once I go the route of adding a GX cassette, which is going to require me changing the driver, which I hopefully can find one for this hub, blah, 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 right? then I will put a new chain on. Or if I don't go that route and I just end up updating to another NX cassette, a new one, I'll put a new chain on at that time. So we'll see. But that's something that'll happen at a later date. Probably not even for the rest of this winter. I'll probably just run with this. So. Okay, so here we are. My face is over here, but it's out of the video because I want to show you how this thing shifts. So I'm going to pedal it and get it down into the hard gear, small ring, and there we go. Perfect. Wait, that was not so perfect. Oh, I must have accidentally pushed the button twice. Yep, there we go. Seems to shift. Seems a tiny slow going into the harder gears. Well, not too bad. But the cable's going to stretch a tiny bit, and so I'm not too worried about that. And then I can just make the fine-tune adjustments with the barrel adjuster. Now all I have to do is the B gap. I'm going to go do that. And I'm going to put a link in the description on how to do it because there's just better videos out there than what I can make, to be honest, on how to do it. But you basically take this tool that they provide somewhere in here. Here it is. You click it in there and line up the teeth from your top cog, adjusting this screw. So I'll go ahead and do that. I have to remind myself of what gear this has to snap into and all that stuff, and what gear to be in and all that. Okay, here we go. I decided to show you how to do the B gap anyway. The reason is I went on YouTube to remember how to do this, and there was some good videos out there, but they seemed a little older, so maybe this will be the most updated video on YouTube. So basically what you want to do is you want to shift your chain into the second one from the biggest cog, and then you want to slide the B gap tool onto the biggest cog, right? And then slide it all the way down to rest on top of that pulley, making sure everything's like snug here, right? And here's the curve here that will rest on top of the pulley. So make sure it's in all the way and against the teeth on this big ring, because it's easy for it to kind of fall out like that, and then you won't get it adjusted properly. The reason it wants to fall out is because the curve wants to roll perfectly on here, but you don't want that. You want this to be perfectly on that outer ring. I didn't hear anybody mention that, so I could easily see somebody making the mistake of doing that and then going, oh, it's good, it's lined up, but it's not resting against the outer cog properly. So you want to make sure that's the priority. Now, once we have that, we're going to go ahead and adjust the derailleur to move the pulley wheel in till it goes into that window. You want that arrow. Let me reach around this way so my arm isn't blocking the video. So we're coming in and getting that point, this guy, lined up right in the center of that little pulley bolt, right? And once it's lined up, yeah, I went a little too far. Whoop, other way. Make sure it's in there. Yep, a little more. Jeez, tiny bit more. There it goes. Now it's perfect. So that's what this does. Really important that you do this because you want your shifting to, you want the pulley to be moving the chain onto the cogs properly. And with Eagle, it's even more critical than with older shifting systems. Now let's check and see how the bike shifts. So you might notice that it's shifting into the smaller cogs better now than it was just a moment ago before I did this. So that's pretty good. And then we can check the top. Jumps down. Yeah, that's really good. Perfect. Okay, so there you have it. I now have GX on my fat bike. No more rusty spring. And I still have the older chain and the older cassette. I'm going to run these a little while before I change those out. And took some time to clean up back here, especially after having that ride in the mud. But this is it. It's all set with GX. I might even go on a ride tonight. There's a cool kind of ride party thing. I might even film it. We'll see. But yeah, I now have a dropper post on this bike, which I added. And I upgraded to GX. And I've monkeyed with the brakes a bunch. Probably to a point where, because I got new rotors and pads and bled the brakes. And they still just don't feel all that awesome. They work, but they just, it's just a very disappointing feel when I squeeze it. Kind of mushy, right? So I might be upgrading the brakes on this bike too. We'll see. I do ride it pretty primarily in the snow in the winter time, so I don't know how critical it is. I'm wearing gloves, and as long as the brakes work, it's not going to be that critical. But I'm picky. I like a brake lever that feels good, as I know many of you are too. So there you have it, Salsa Mukluk. Love this bike. It is definitely a big upgrade from the older Specialized Fat Boy I used to have from like 2016. So there you have it. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.